Welcome on board Marketing Tech Leadership Series, Volume 9, 2024. Today, the focus should be on unlocking the value of first-party data and really the strategies for success. Thanks again to Sibylla and Dirk for having Tervaro as our partner on board, jointly with a bunch of other partners. So thanks for being partner for a long time. Today, I do have the pleasure to have a couple of knowledgeable colleagues with me at my side. So on the one side, it's Alice from Nectar 360, a Sainsbury's brand. Alice, thank you very much, first of all, for sharing the case of Sainsbury's today. Happy to have you with us. Plus, we have Dirk Rohwedder as the founder and CEO of Tervaro, and the one and only Norman Wagner as the managing director of UTIC. And what we are trying to do this afternoon basically is to see what are the benefits of ID management solutions? Do we already have reached the critical mass, and how best to get it implemented? So a whole bunch of topics which we're trying to streamline, still being conforming into 1 hour. So shortly around the agenda, I will give a short intro. I'm the chief cheering committee for Alice, Norman, and Dirk on the background of the MarTech Leadership Series. Then Alice is going to get started with strategies for success at Sainsbury's. We have the panel jointly with Dirk and Norman then for making more sort of a deeper dive into market developments. And then I do hope we still have some time for Q&A and discussion. And at the end, just save the date for further Marketing Tech Leadership Series to be coming up, plus the Marketing Tech Summit 2025. All right, ready to rumble? Good. So I get started, as I said. First of all, what is the background of the MarTech Leadership Series? So again, as in all leadership series, we have been asked, based on the Marketing Tech Monitor, which we published since 2019, to have a webinar of 1 hour. And it's not just a descriptive approach, but really providing normative recommendations to colleagues. It should be content quality in depth and breadth, analog to the Marketing Tech Monitor or Marketing Tech Summit. And on purpose, the access is restricted. So we always invite something like 800 CMOs, heads of marketing, online digital marketing across the DACH region. And what we are trying to do is basically have some sort of forum for a content-driven discussion, pretty narrow, picking out one topic at a time, and have it every 4 weeks, Thursdays from 5 to 6 p.m. And the feedback so far was astonishing. We normally do have between 80 and 120 attendees. And as I said today, I guess 70 colleagues have registered to attend. But anyway, we also have the recording at hand. And so at the end, we also are going to distribute the recordings and to everybody who most probably was not able to attend due to other circumstances today. The year always starts with us with the MarTech Monitor. So I guess many of you will be in the survey round, which is going to get started in January. So please fill out the survey again. So again, we're going to ask 1,600 colleagues across DACH on their perspectives on MarTech and data-driven strategies. We will resolve all the MarTech monitors and on the MarTech Summit in September. And plus we have the AI Startup Bootcamp, which will take place and or will be effective on the MarTech Summit. Plus we have the MarTech Award. So across the year, what we're trying to do is basically have a hand on all the development and data-driven marketing and customer interaction, plus not do it in a more sort of, as I said, descriptive way, but more sort of normative quality and depth in content-driven way. That's the background. Saying this, since many of you also participated over the last years in the surveys, since 2019, the MarTech Monitor, we've been serving something more than 2,000 companies. We had more than 180 one-on-one interviews, almost 30 case studies, almost now 30 projects. And the only pitfall for us was, where Scott Brinker always hinted me to that, is that everything we did was just published in German. And Scott Brinker said, you guys are most probably the only guys on this planet who have the tendency to bring everything in context, but your fault is that you have everything in German. So We worked on it, and basically the book on data-driven customer engagement was just released at Springer. So thanks to many of you for participating, joining, contributing ideas and content. Also Norman and Dirk and many other colleagues. Thank you very much for that. It's just out, and I feel relieved. So Scott Brinker told me do it in English, and we did. Thank you very much for that. One piece, and that's the reason why we have the webinar today, is out of the MarTech Monitor 2024. The most important reasons for the inadequate use of ID solutions is the lack of critical mass on the provider side. So we don't have market penetration. We have no technology neutrality on the side of the provider. So are there further walled gardens? Or the third reason was, when we asked them, is insufficient reach, and I don't know. So basically what we currently do have in the market is a combination on, well, from a technology perspective, it might get a little bit clunky and pretty much in detail. On the other side, I don't understand it. And third of all, do we have already critical mass in the market? Topics we're going to address them today, where I'm happily getting perspectives, number one from Alice, and then later also from Dirk and Norman. All right. This was the intro. Saying this, I pass the candlestick over to the one and only Alice. So, Sainsbury's case. So, how did you implement ID management? What was the objective? What are lessons learned? Alice, stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Ralph, and thank you for doing this in English. My German is definitely not good enough to cover this topic. So if we can just skip forward, what I'm going to do is really just give you an understanding of who we are at Nectar, why first-party data and ultimately ID solutions are important for us, the use case, and then some of the questions and considerations that you would need to kind of consider as a business going into this space. So first of all, Nectar is a coalition loyalty program, which basically means that we're able to offer incentives to our customers through the method of points that then get converted into pounds. And that is not only across Sainsbury's, which is a supermarket business in the UK, Argos, which is our general merchandise business, but also other well-known brands such as American Express and British Airways. What that means is that we have billions and billions of rows of data and understanding about our customers. And through that magic of the Nectar and the loyalty ID, we can then use that across our marketing estate to really bring that to life for customers. And then the all important piece and where it all comes together is being able to connect everything together to understand how did those customers then go on to purchase both on site, so through our websites, but also within our store environment. And that's amazingly important for us. And when we think about the rise of the retail media networks, and I know there's loads out there across the globe, I think about 200 at the last count, that first party data and that unique ID that is applied to all of those customers allow us to do that magic of the closed loop piece. So moving on to the next slide. How we do this is through an amazing platform that we have called our Sainsbury's Insight platform. And here we get all of the customer data together, and that's both transactional data, but also information that we glean from the Nectar card around where customers live, what life stage they're at, and all of the other connected pieces of the puzzle that we can infer to build those audiences out from the first party data. We can then serve ads to relevant customers and measure that campaign impact. Moving through to the next slide. What you guys really want to know is how does it work? So we work with Tavare as our customer data platform to ingest that Nectar ID as our first party identifier. We then have built something called our digital trading platform, which allows us to target consumers across social media and the wider web. We build audiences off what we understand about those customers within our customer data platform. We then ingest the creative from brands and then run campaigns across Meta, Google, and the Trade Desk through passing those ID solutions to them so that we can then create that audience set and doing that match across a kind of unique key. And then we understand how that has performed and send back the transactional data often into the ad platform, again, using that first party ID to be able to kind of create the measurement and the reporting that comes off the back of it. And everything is, as I said, connected to that Nectar ID. It really is the lifeblood of everything we do. And if we didn't have that amazing first party data asset, I wouldn't be here talking to you today because we wouldn't have an ID solution. But B, it really means that we can understand what works, what doesn't work, and then refine our offering accordingly. Now, I want to be really honest, this is a really difficult process to go through. So on the next slide, I've just gone through some of the key questions that we have asked throughout the time that we've been building this out. The first thing is, how do we make the data usable? So how do we make sure it is structured in a way that connects back to that common identifier of the ID so that we can then think about how we ingest that into marketing campaigns? The second thing was, should we acquire our own IDs or should we partner with someone? Now, that's a really important question depending on where you are within the supply chain. I won't lie to you, to acquire IDs, to maintain IDs, make sure that you're keeping them safe from a legal perspective, it requires a lot of people, it requires a lot of cost. And depending on your business or kind of where you operate, what we find within the retail media industry is that often our brands will come to us because it's easier for them to partner with us and take our understanding and utilize our ID as kind of really that springboard to being able to access customers. The third thing is, what internal and external requirements do we need to meet? Now, that can be policies that you have within your internal business, but it can also be, what does the legislation mean? And when I move through into the next slide in a couple of minutes time, I've got some of the kind of considerations across the UK and Germany. Also, you can skip back one just so I can go through the rest of the questions, if that's okay. The next question, sorry, it's a bit slow on my screen.
Yeah.
Just the one with the questions on, if that's okay. I can talk through them, don't worry, I've got them on another screen here. Some of the other questions that you would need to ask yourself is, if you are going to collect your own IDs, how do you manage consent and communication with your customer? How do you make sure it's really clear how you're using that ID and all of the data that's assigned with it? And how do you make sure, as changes come up, both from a legislation point of view, but also from a policy point of view, you're carrying it through? And then what integration requirements are there with other systems? So when we think about that diagram that I had a couple of slides back, we talked about how we integrate with Meta. Now, for Meta, a Nectar ID doesn't mean anything. So it's more around, how do we then use the ID to be able to translate it into a language that they can understand, being able to then bring it back into our system to connect it into the ID to carry through. And then the final and probably the most important question is, how do you make sure that you're keeping that data safe? So how are you working with trusted partners within this environment to make sure that you are containing and managing your customers' data in a way that is compliant? Now, just through to my last slide, I will say I am not an expert on data legislation, but luckily my DPO is. So he's prepared me a couple of quick differences between the UK and Germany. And I think this is really important, right? Because I can tell you this from a UK perspective, but how it operates in your markets may be quite different. Now, from a regulatory framework point of view, both the UK and Germany do follow GDPR, but following Brexit, there was obviously a change in how GDPR has been applied. We have different also kind of bodies that govern us, for example. So within the UK, we're governed by the Information Commissioner's Office, and they really are responsible for enforcing all of the laws. Traditionally, from an enforcement perspective, it is more around actually, how does the ICO support us from providing guidance and support to help us comply? Now, earlier this year, the ICO wrote to 100 of the top businesses within the UK, kind of outlining some concerns they had around consent and ID management, and then gave a period of time for us to be able to reflect and understand what that would mean. Comparatively, in Germany, obviously you have the applicability of national laws, and all of the federal states are responsible for their own enforcement. Our understanding, and you guys will know a lot better, is that there actually is quite a strict enforcement of data protection law within Germany, and there are cases of significant fines that are taken against companies. And then you have the additional consideration that has come out recently around the collective redress directive, which opens up claims from non-material damage and obviously from individuals. And then the final difference that we have is around kind of data transfer. So after Brexit, the UK received the adequacy decision from the EU, which allows us to pass data freely between the UK and the EU. We've just recently got a new government in place, and that is being considered around how does that adequacy fit? Is there any kind of additional legislation that we will bring in? In comparative measures, obviously within Germany, you're still part of the EU, and therefore you're kind of governed by that kind of central legislation there. So whilst the UK and Germany obviously are both adhere to the GDPR framework, there are differences in the regulatory approaches and enforcement, which in my personal opinion means that actually a lot more consideration has to go into that, the thought processes around first party data and kind of exploration into that area because of, I guess, a more stricter enforcement of a rule set. And I put my sources there. If any of them are incorrect, if anyone wants to challenge me on any of that, then I am more than happy. But yeah, so that kind of brings to an end my section on this. And I think I'm going to pass over to Dirk. Is that correct?
Yeah. Alice, first of all, thanks for that, for sharing all your insights. Let me go just for 1 second, one step back.
Yes.
How do you interact with publishers in the market? So basically, what sort of data will be transferred from your end then to publishers?
It's mainly the audience data that gets transferred. So actually, who are the customers that we want that publisher to then go out into their kind of own estate, find and serve our advertising to? And then the information that we receive back from them is more around actually how many of that audience kind of saw the campaign, what did they interact with? So it's more that traditional kind of media interaction. And then when we receive all of that information back into our own platforms, that's where we use the first party data to allow us to then bring together all of those conversion metrics to really kind of create the full rounded circle for the brands that we work with.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Thanks. Anyway, we're going to have some time then later on Q&A. And then, as you said, we pass over the stick then to Dirk and Norman, unlocking the value of first-party data. So how can we do that? We spoke at the beginning about a couple of challenges, yeah? Lack of reach, lack of critical mass, lack of penetration, basically in the market. So what is missing and how will it get resolved? And the idea of an ID is, I guess, pretty much striking. Dirk and Norman, or?
Okay, thanks. Alice and then Ralph. First, I want really to start kind of where Alice ended in terms of kind of showing kind of what an ID graph and the first party ID can make a difference. And for that, obviously, we have to look at the unique challenge of the Sainsbury Group, which I guess all multi-brand groups have. Here you can see basically there are 5 different brands. Actually, they are on 4 different domains because 2 is kind of part of the Saints or is a subdomain of the Sainsbury's domain. And then you have 3 different customer IDs, Sainsbury ID, Argos ID, and Nectar ID. And the challenge obviously is to bring all of that together into one connected profile, which the Tivaro IDR or customer data platform actually does. And you could see that we are kind of passing that on. And obviously, kind of if we come to the next page, then the question is kind of why is this better? And the Sainsbury Group always likes to try out things and says you can talk a lot about theory, Dirk and the team. We want to see it in practice. And here we've taken kind of two different approaches to compare them. And what you often see is that you basically are said, okay, to match IDs, you take the login ID or the customer ID and you do the match on this basis. And most companies don't have the situation that kind of their users are having 100% login. Yeah. So typically what we do, and I will talk about that in the next slide, is you have to augment it with different identification methods. So what we have done is the typical recommendation. You take kind of a login ID here, the Argos customer ID. Now let's stay on this just one more second. And we have and this then is activated, as you could see in Alison's slides, to Google through the Google Campaign Manager. And then we've taken the UMID, which is kind of the proprietary Sainsbury's Universal Marketing ID, which kind of combines kind of the profiles as I've shown before. And the result was that kind of the match rate of kind of the audiences with Google was 2.8 times higher, and obviously that allows kind of a much better activation of customer segments and shows the power of your own ID. And then we can come to the next.
But Dirk, if I get you right, it all goes at the end into one Nectar ID, yeah? So you bundle all different ideas into one.
The Nectar ID is connected to this, yeah. So basically, it's a profile. What we call it's a profile ID, and the profile ID has all the other IDs you've seen before connected to it, yeah. So it can have a Nectar ID. It can have it depends, yeah. If the customer has the Nectar and Sainsbury and August, it can have all three of them. But it is, and then you can connect all the data. That's what Alice has shown, because their data is then based on the Nectar ID, for example, and then you can link it to this profile because it contains this ID. Yeah. But rather than taking that ID kind of for the audience matches, we are just basically saying take the UMID, because in the end you get a higher degree of matches, and I can also explain kind of on the next page how that is actually done. And I will show you kind of the three things we have seen here, but I also want to generalize the approach a little bit, because we said it's unlocking the value of first-party data, and basically on our experience, I can show that here what we've done for Nectar Sainsbury, but also other companies can do it. And basically, I always say, first you have to look at what kind of use case you will be doing, and you have to tailor your strategy to the use case. Obviously, here we are talking about kind of monetizing data, kind of retail media business case, where you activate audiences to Google. So that's a very specific use case, and then obviously you can tailor your identity strategy and kind of the marketing integration to it. So if we stick with that, for that, basically we introduce kind of two things. We took the logins, yeah, all the logins from those web pages, but we combine that with cross-domain, because it can be that a user logs in one page but is not logged in another, and by doing it cross-domain, we can combine all the logins even if they have happen on different websites, and by combining that we reach kind of these higher match rates in the end. And then you can see this ID can be used in many parts of the MarTech stack. And in this case, it was propagated to a Google Campaign Manager as kind of the marketing ID. And but in other cases it might be different. Yeah, I would take just another example where you say many companies are still struggling, for example, to understand in their analytics systems kind of what the situation is. Yeah, very often you basically can only look at devices, and then you don't really get kind of, if a user uses different devices, you don't get that together. And here's maybe an interesting statistic. We found out that when you get 10 new devices and you have no deduplication because you don't use any ID graphing, then typically out of those 10, actually 9 are duplicates. Only 1 is really new. And that is quite significant, and many companies don't even recognize this challenge because they have no transparency about it. And again, by combining IDs, ID identification methods, I've mentioned 2, but there are more, you can reach kind of a much higher resolution, so that you understand better what is the person that actually uses the device, and then obviously you can use it in your landscape. In this first case, you would just say, okay, if you have, for example, Google Analytics, you use your own marketing ID kind of to send there, and so that's in our view where you have to do these 3 steps kind of to make it manageable, and not kind of do everything at once, because otherwise it will get overwhelming. And this is also, you always ask kind of critical mass, but what you can do here is actually build it yourself. You are creating the critical mass kind of for those use cases. Now let's come, and here I'm about to hand over to Norman. Obviously you can do that kind of and use it on your own media, on your website, in your app. You can kind of use this information kind of for push channels, but obviously kind of many advertisers will want to use paid media. And there obviously we have then the second challenge. Once you've created kind of your own ID graph, then you want to match it kind of with paid media. And we have now seen this example that we use at Sainsbury, but obviously there are also additional ways of doing that. And here I think we come kind of to UTIC and innovation kind of to do that, and Norman will talk about it. And that obviously then gives you an opportunity not to only use it on own media, but use the same data kind of in paid media. And maybe that's the point for Norman to take over and show kind of what the status and the development of the last year has been.
Oh, Norman.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. It's really interesting to listen to what we heard so far. You know, very often we hear there's Google, and then we have an ID which is based on logins, and then combined also with the sites not logins. But actually, it all drains down to logins, and when you want to match it, that's the reason why you very often go to Google, because you need logins too, to get a high match rate and a high rate of finding the users. When you go to open web, when you go to quality journalism websites, to publishers, the login rates are low. And now is the question how to tackle that, how to find it there. And this is where UTIC started. UTIC is a joint venture of 4 European telcos. We currently operate in Germany, in France, Spain. We're launching Austria next week. We are in Italy, and we are going to the UK. Already are there with an office. And for Germany, we are working with 8 telcos and MVNOs, so the big 3, Telecom, Vodafone, O2, and also some sub-brands. We are currently implemented on over 100 domains. So you see the big sites like FAZ, Frankfurter Rundschau, Bild, Welt, Handelsblatt, Süddeutsche, Merkur, and so on. Currently, we have on these sites, we have 13.5 million active users, which means users means stable IDs deduplicated over these domains. How we do that? Let me quickly explain how UTIC is working. When you go, and you probably have all seen it when you have a German mobile and you're on the site, you see a UTIC consent, and as soon as you give a consent on the consent banner, your IP address, which can rotate, doesn't matter, because the telco always knows who is the contract owner, goes to the telco, and the telco delivers a stable identifier without any additional information. But this is stored in our site. This is the network signal, and then we give a further ID to the publishers or to the advertisers. For example, Renault in France just implemented UTIC on their sites, and that's it. You have a stable ID which is just based on consent, and you don't need logins and so on. You then can use it in the Theovaro ecosystem, for example, to stabilize your graphs, but also to export it, to find it in open web. You can build audiences based on that and send this to your ad tech, and then find it on the attached publisher sites, which also don't need an input. 100% deterministic, no fingerprinting. The browsers are no gatekeepers anymore. It doesn't matter if the cookie is deleted and you come back, give a consent, you always get the same ID. In all other cases, you would be a new user. So you have a super stable ID. And Dirk said what you learned. We learned that sometimes you have 30, 40 times a cookie for a single user over a period, and every time it would be a new user, but actually it's always the same. And with this stability, you see it. And across Europe, we have 38 million IDs. We are currently integrated on Equative and Adform, fully integrated, so they can manage everything with UTIC. PubMatic is also using is also using and going through UTIC. And when you look at campaign results, it just works. And it's quite obvious because you can address cookieless browsers like Safari and Firefox. So you immediately get incremental reach. We see that on the Telefonica campaign or the Dr. Oetker campaign, which we had, reach of your campaign plus 30-40% of users which you haven't reached in the past because there are no cookies. And when you run any cookie strategies, it's not there. Due to the fact that it's so stable and deduplicated, you have a much higher, lower wastage. You see that on Oetker and so on. And then you see we also have improvements on click rates. The reason is not the stability. The reason, from my point of view, is because it's pure human traffic. So you also sort out the problem with bots. Because bots don't have telco contracts. And if so, a bot can generate 1,000 emails and 1,000 Facebook accounts easily. And we all know the bot armies out there, but they would always have only one ID. So it's easy to filter. So all the business models of the bots doesn't work anymore when you go with UTIC. So this is, from my point of view, that's really a game changer because the gatekeeper function of the browser is took away. You don't have to exchange email addresses to find it somewhere. So like Google Custom Match, you usually upload email addresses and you can, if the user has the full control, if he removes the consent or a consent hub, the ID is just not valid anymore. It's just not working. So, and no email address is flying around. So you have a much higher data privacy level. And and now we are, as said, we don't build audience, we don't build profiles, we just the infrastructure, and we see more and more coming onto that infrastructure. For example, in Germany, we just did an integration with NetID, which means that also NetID operates on our protocols, which increases the reach again. So we see, and Ralf is always asking, critical mass, critical reach. We see in France, we are currently also integrated on fixed line, so Wi-Fi, which we will launch early next year. I just had a meeting with BFDI, German data privacy regulations. Alice, as you said, it's a little more complex because you have 18 of that, but we're nearly there. But when we're live with that, we will be also able to go on CTV and desktop. We see it in France. The websites where we're now integrated with mobile and fixed, we reach 70% of all the traffic with IDs. So I think when the adoption is there, the critical mass is solved.
But Norman, let me step in for a second. Reaching critical mass, cool. This is my favorite topic. Yeah, as you said, I do think you have a striking argument with coming from the telcos with the mobile number. Cool. Now you have all publishers already signed up. Cool. What about with retailers and advertisers? Since I always do think when we have the discussion is we have two issues. Number one is it's a question of understanding. Do you really got the notion? Do you really got the beauty of the beast? So it's sort of know-how, knowledge, which you need to build up. And on the other side is, well, are we going to end up in some sort of wallet garden again? This is the fear they're having. How do you tackle that?
When you go to the websites of Lidl in Germany, for example, you will already see and read the consent text. You will see the consent for UTIC. So Schwarz Group is technologically really, I think, the fastest in the market, but we're also talking to some further retailers. It's more than talking. So I expect in Q1 to have a couple of retailers also offline in the ecosystem. So audiences, even on brick and mortar data, could be used for audiences then. And that's what we're currently planning. Intermarché in France, it's very similar. So I hope when we start in UK, Sainsbury, Alice, happy to talk. I connect you with Sarah or MD there. And so I'm optimistic that this is also there. And then, I can talk for hours. What we are also planning currently in digital, we have the situation, validated audience measurement. Yeah, so we all know we have tons of audiences out there, third-party audience based on cookies, and everyone who validated that knows actually it's even to get man or female is sometimes very tricky. And what we are currently doing is we're currently running a proof of concept. Actually, it's done already. We are now consenting the German TV panel from GfK. And so the panelist will have a stable UTIC ID. So what you then can do, you have a campaign where, let's say, I've reached this 3, 4, 5 million users, yeah, and have this 5 million IDs. You put them in a clean room, and as you don't need email address, so you just take the UTIC ID, yeah, in the clean room, and you match it with the panelists with weights, and then you get a structure. You get a standardized socio-demographic, which is the same like you have it in other media. And the good thing is all the same for everyone. So all the publishers can just upload their users on their website, Foop, yeah, and you have a comparable, standardized audience. This excludes for a while, from my understanding, the GAFAs. They will for a long time stay in their lonely walled garden, which then will be smaller, yeah, which will be smaller from my point of view, and also within their data. But let's see how that develops. Yep. That's maybe something for 26.
But Norman, I do think that your value proposition is striking. What is the major challenge for you currently? Is it more sort of establishing more proof of concepts and test it out with retailers, with advertisers, or is it more sort of direction of building up know-how and telling everybody the beauty of the beast? What would be your focus?
As you see, I think it's quite, as you said, it's quite striking. It's not very complex. It's quite easy to understand from my point of view, and the adoption of the publishers there, the retailers are coming. The biggest problem is the third player in the market, which is the advertisers. You know, that's what I'm currently experiencing. I'm getting super good feedback of, oh yeah, we must do that. I understand that. And then going to the agency, and at that moment, yeah, let's see, cookies are still working, and I have my KPIs, and they are still working very well. And why should I change? And I think I call it, we should do philosophy, is very dominant in situations where you have uncertainty of the situations. And so, and there's, honest, in this round, there's also the biggest risk, because we've seen too often good solutions coming up. Here we see a very strong adoption rate of publishers all across Europe, but now we need to get the thing rolling, because otherwise, and I get that with the publishers, they would say, okay, now we delivered. We tiered down the silos between all the publishers, you know, can book reach and frequency across the market. But when you don't adapt, why should we do that? Why should we invest? And this is something we need to avoid, because then, you know, I think there's one chance. Telco networks is quite obvious that this is the real independent solution, where players which have their own interest don't get any gatekeeper function.
Absolutely. Since particularly with the setup of all the major telcos are pulling together, right from the definition, right from the start, you have everybody coming together.
Yeah. I've said that we can skip the chart because it's just showing the penetration.
Last value proposition, pulling together UTIC and Theravaro.
Yeah, and then I think I might start and then Norman chip in. So I think this kind of shows how you can kind of put the two things, what I've said in the beginning and what Norman said, how you can kind of do that together. That's why we also have a strategic go-to-market partnership. And this looks a little bit complicated, but let me kind of explain it. Yeah, so you can basically integrate the JavaScript kind of into the app, and then if you are an advertiser, let's say, and then you get what Norman said, kind of the stable identifier, which is called a MarTech path, and you can use that for every single a user that has consented, be it in your app, be it in your web. And then obviously you can add that identifier into your identity graph, and it has a big advantage because it can do some deduplications. Yeah, for example, if you have multiple web views, or a cookie is deleted, or you want to show kind of the same user across domains, if it's kind of the same company operating those domains, or if you have an app and the web, you can kind of bring it together, which you cannot do at all with cookies. And you can obviously bring that together, and then the first use case is then to activate kind of audiences in the open internet. So that's kind of the core use case, and it's the next evolution of using UTIC, and I think a path forward for advertisers that in the first step try it out, they run the campaign, they don't need this level of integration to get started, but obviously this is then the next level of powering it.
No.
So before I continue, maybe Norman.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something when we talk about use cases, and we didn't talk about it before because someone told me that he's doing that. When you have the stabilization, yeah, so what Dirk just said, the deduplication. So in your current system, you always would be a new user, and as it always gets the same UTIC ID, you have this deduplication and the higher stability. Now, this client which I was talking to is applying that to search, to their search strategy. It's also a retailer saying, okay, suddenly I see that some keywords always delivers the same users. And in the past, it looked like a new user, and I'm paying 3 euros, 4 euros for that users, and I get that users 20, 30 times because it seems to be their behavior just to type in the name and come. And when by optimizing that, they are saving a 2-digit amount on search, on their search budget, which is very significant just by understanding which keywords are delivering all the same users all the time, again and again. When we founded UTIC, we didn't think of that use case, but this is scaling super fast, yeah, because there are also big budgets. It's not only about spending and doing campaigns, it's also using the MarTech path to understand who's coming to you, who you are paying for.
No. It's a direct financial impact, you know, which is again pretty much striking.
Yeah. I think it's again a huge example of the underestimation of deduplication, because typically you don't. That's what I said in the beginning with this kind of 10 and 9 are duplicates. This is what typically companies don't see. Yeah, and once they see, as Norman said, then there are great examples of what you can actually do with this knowledge, and as in this example, it really pays off.
And a couple of years ago, when we started the MarTech Summit, there was a guy called Norman Wagner. I'm not sure if you know him. And he said, this time working for Deutsche Telekom, he said, what is most striking is that you always pay for the same audience several times because you have no way to identify who already was in the game before. I guess you agree with this early Norman Wagner.
Absolutely. And probably that's the reason when he saw there's a company on the horizon which changes that, to quit one of the most interesting jobs he ever had and do something new.
Understandable. Cool. Q&A and this discussion. I just skip it here with my laptop. Questions to Norman, Dirk, and Alice. Probably I might get started, Alice. What were the main challenges building up the system you described? Was it more sort of getting everybody on the same page, everybody having the same understanding what you're going to do? Or is it more, oh, holy shit, data security, nitty-gritty stuff, and so data security guys are coming into, or what Norman said before, or is more sort of you get stuck with agencies and media agencies and they don't like it? So what was the main challenge?
I think the main challenge is the understanding, of what you're trying to do and why it's important. And I think that probably like branches off all of the three considerations that you said there. So making sure that you have got the right teams within the business that understand kind of this ad tech world and the world of the value of the first party ID is one. Again, kind of bringing your legal and your data protection, counterparts along on the journey. And then exactly to your point, where does that put us in the media ecosystem, and how do we make sure that what we're doing is not dysfunctional, and that we can make sure that it is scalable? Because, getting all of this stuff in place, it's not cheap or easy for a business. So you have to make sure that it is kind of sustainable and going to provide sustainable value, not only to us as a business, but also to our customers. Because at the end of the day, first party IDs are amazing, but if you lose the trust of your customers, it's very easy for them to take them away.
But who was involved on your side in those projects? Is this more sort of the head of online marketing, more technical guys? Was it more sort of the early Norman Wagner, more sort of the media guys? So which sort of cross-functional teams you need to build for that?
Yeah, so definitely the concept, the route to market, what we want to do, the concept all came from my team, so from the media teams. We then brought in kind of our ad tech engineers and product and legal and DPI. And then once the concept was tested, it proved it works. It's then about how you then sell that into your sales team as well, so that they understand what is the proposition that they're kind of taking to market. So it's a real cross-functional effort to kind of get anything like this away.
And Alice, tell me, since nobody else listens, it's just the two of us. Next time, what are your lessons learned? What would you do differently? Yeah, if you're starting greenfield again, white piece of paper, what would you do differently? So sort of lessons learned, yeah.
Yeah, so I think when we started this project probably 4.5 years ago, and the landscape was a very, very different place to where it is now. So I think, what we would be thinking about differently is what is the interoperability of our IDs within the other ID frameworks that have kind of come out along the way. And I think that probably would have changed how we built some of our functionality, but hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Would it make sense, you just said earlier, to get guys like Norman and Dirk coming to the table, first of all, for some sort of education session? Since, as you said, yeah, everybody needs to speak the same language, having the same understanding. So pretty often you find that you're talking about IDs, about EdTech, what the heck ever. And then would it make sense just before we start anything, we all need to speak the same language? Yeah? Would it make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we love to talk in acronyms, right? That's the kind of industry that we work in. And actually just some of those basic foundations of making sure that everyone's definition of an acronym is exactly the same thing is super important as you're going along the journey. So we definitely had to do a lot of education within our business as to what we wanted to do. And, through working with Tavara, etc., they were able to educate our business into what this new concept was, how it would work for us, what the value would be. So yeah, it's very important to get everyone around the table.
Question from Carsten.
I think it's going into the direction of Dirk, I would say, probably. What are prerequisites when you're getting into projects with client? Does the client need to have a proper project before you come on board?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I say there are not so many prerequisites, because sometimes people say, oh, kind of having a sophisticated ID solution is kind of the icing on the cake, is something you do kind of in the end. But actually, it's a lot about kind of foundation. So typically, we ask in the beginning, kind of what do you want to achieve? What is the use case which is kind of most important for you? And then you start kind of designing what you need kind of for IDs for that, what type of integrations you need for that, and then you get a starting point. And the good thing is, once you've laid that foundation, you can use it kind of for other things as well. So I basically say, I disagree sometimes with people that say, oh, I need all of these prerequisites. I need to sort all my data out before, or I need to first change my whole landscape. I just think then you'll never get to the point of starting. Yeah, because I hear that from some kind of quite often. I actually think the opposite is true. When you kind of have a strategy like that, it makes things a little bit easier, because you think in the end, if you want to bring data together, you need to bring IDs together, yeah, because they don't all have the same IDs kind of from the beginning. So thinking first about that, and not just kind of doing it in a way that you say, I need the overarching concept, but I focus on a few things that are really important and then build it out, I think is, in my view, a good strategy, which we have seen work. And those that try kind of to do all the things kind of first, they never get to this.
But Dirk, let me get one question more, because when often you have on client side the situation that especially customer data or is in various places and the data quality is not really good. Let's put it, I'm from Hamburg, so
Yes.
Not really good means it's really bad, right? So and is that something that needs to be sorted out before starting an ID management project, at least to a certain extent, because otherwise you have shit data and projects will necessarily fail.
Yeah, I mean, again here we have to look kind of on the. I mean, in general, I agree. When you say, okay, my kind of, I have lots of data quality problems, they will show up. But again, when you start kind of from the side that you have kind of devices, you want to understand the persons behind that, you are integrating kind of those methods, and then kind of an ID graph forms automatically. Now the challenge can be to say, okay, if I'm linking now my operational data to that, and that operational data has duplicates and has problems, then of course kind of the quality might not as good as you think. But I think, to be honest, it's better than kind of to detect in use cases those problems and address them, rather than spending 2 or 3 years to say, I need to clean that all up. Because typically, if you want to fix, what you cannot do on the marketing side is fix operational problems with your data. You need to push it back. You need to tell them this is what you can do. But if you just wait for that to be, then you cannot action as a marketer for a long time. And I think that is, for me, in most cases, not really an option, because the market is challenging all the time.
You're locking yourself away for the next couple of years. Norman.
Yeah, and let me add one thing. You know, it depends what you want to do with the data. Integration of UTIC for all the customers and publishers we've seen so far is, when you get the legal stuff right, technically it's one or two sprints. So it was a couple of weeks maximum. And actually it's quite simple. And then you already enabled yourself for a cookieless world, in terms of you can reach your audience, you can build audiences on your site just based on interest without logins. And then you can start from there. But you know, this cookieless world, actually it's there, even if Google postponed it, but it's only 30-40% of the traffic which you currently have. And anyway, so if you want to expand that, you make use of it. That's a very easy entry. And then using a system like Theovaro, where you bring in the others and has lots of information on how to manage it, that's the iteration you can do there. But actually, this part, preparing you for the cookieless, you can start immediately, and there's not much you need to do.
Yeah, I was just going to round it off by saying I don't think it's a matter of failure. I think it's a matter of scale. And I think that's the fundamental piece. You can start wherever. It's just how scalable do you want it to be.
And I do also what Dirk, Norman, and Alice, what you've been saying is get started, start learning over time, and then further enhance it. Since it's an own project, which you need also to learn over time. Also, as you say, having bunches of acronyms in the marketplace and stuff like that, and getting everybody cross-functional together. Any further questions from the audience? I don't see a hand currently, so let me briefly go back. Last but not least, so rounding it up, thank you very much for all the insights, first of all, Alice, Norman, and Dirk. I do think I'm convinced that everything around ID management will be the future in terms of having a solid platform for gathering data together, plus the activation in the marketplace. So thanks for sharing. Plus, also, last but not least for this evening, the next topics. On the 19th of December, you should then get an invite over the next couple of days, utilizing customer data in retail, a sort of data management case, which we're going to demonstrate. On the 16th of January, already talking about 2025, sorry to say, how Gen AI capabilities are used to reduce text and content development and shorten time to markets, which I do think is pretty interesting. And already please save the date. We're going to have the next Marketing Tech Summit on the 30th of September and 1st of October, again in Berlin. But before we have that, then in January, we have the wonderful task to get started again with the Marketing Tech Monitor 2025. So please, if you receive in your email box a wonderful email from my side with a short link, I always say it only takes 10 minutes to fill out the survey, which is complete bullshit, which was always bullshit, since it normally takes more time. But please, if you want to help us also with MarTech Monitor, fill it out. So in terms of gathering, again, something around 400 respondents across DACH, in terms of getting many different perspectives on how to use data and IT and capabilities, culture, strategies, and bring all the pieces together. Saying this, thank you very much for today. Thanks for giving some sort of light into ID management and Theavaro. And I do think, Norman, Dirk, what I also heard from Alice, it's pretty often some sort of, we need to get the understanding broader into the market. Norman, it's, as you said, on the retailer side, advertiser side, getting everybody on the same page.
And from thinking of it to doing, I think that's really needed.
Yeah, I do think, particularly we Germans are pretty good in building up theoretical cases, but we just need to get started.
We are overcomplicating from time to time. Sometimes it's just simpler when you start.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much, Norman, Dirk, and Alice, for all these insights. Thanks for the great session, and hope to talk to you soon. Have a wonderful evening, and hope to see you next time in the next Marketing Tech Leadership Series. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Thanks, guys.
Good. Goodbye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.